looking at performing process research and development, it's important to think of the chemical process itself, the requirements of the process, and what equipment that we could employ. Apologies if this is a little bit basic for some, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. Broadly speaking, there are 4 types of reactor designs that we consider within quotient sciences. We have traditional batch reactors, which are all on board reactors. Typically, you've got low solute concentrations with a high volume of solvent. Typically suffer from poor heat transfer and are dependent upon agitation. There's also potential in certain manufacturing sites where you've got different vessels with different physical parameters. You may get different agitation profiles, different heat spots and dead spaces within the vessels, which can impact the quality on scale up. We can also look at continuous stirred tank reactors, which work under the same principles as traditional batch reactors, but instead they're typically smaller and work in series, often used in steady state. They're pretty good for things like heterogeneous processes where you can transfer your reaction between multiple vessels without having to stop the process and offboard solids. On the right hand side, we've got continuous flow chemistry technologies. We have sort of plug flow or continuous flow reactors, and the diagram at the top is showing what is effectively thin metal or polymer tubes which allow the reaction to take place, and I'll discuss more about flow chemistry in a moment. They're very good for parameter control, high hazard control, thermal control and high pressure reactions, less good with heterogeneous mixtures. The final type of reactor that we use at Quotient Sciences, which I won't speak about too much today, are packed bed reactors, which are typically biphasic systems where you've either got a gas or dissolved gas passed over a solid substrate like a catalyst, which allows the reaction to take place. So what is flow chemistry? Flow chemistry is the process of performing a chemical reaction in a tubular reactor whereby starter materials are continuously consumed and converted into products in a single flowing stream as opposed to being manufactured in traditional batch modes. The advantages of using flow chemistry is that it gives you great control over reaction parameters, which improves your yield, your purity, and reduces your cycle time of processes once established. They allow you to handle very hazardous materials because the inventory of reaction at any one point is incredibly small. If you imagine scaling up a reactor on batch, you may go from tens of litres to hundreds of litres to ton reactors. At any one time, your inventory of the reaction is getting larger and larger as you scale up. With continuous flow technologies, the inventory of the reaction at any one point does not change. You simply run the equipment longer or potentially run multiple units in parallel. The footprint of scale up in these equipment again is significantly reduced compared to standard batch reactors. As I said, you can simply put multiple of these units in parallel side by side and typically take up laboratory size scale areas, whereas large pilot plants will typically take up areas of tennis courts or greater. They're very simple and reproducible once you've established the conditions for the process. And while there are commercial kits out there, they are all very flexible in the design and they're easily reconfigured to your process. So you don't have to shoehorn your synthesis into the equipment. You can develop the equipment around the process that you need. It's very simple to do online processing and monitoring, whereas batch reactors, you may have to cool down the vessel to take a sample safely before heating back up. With continuous flow technologies, you can simply divert a sample of the reaction stream to take your IPC checks. And ultimately, a significant reduction in labour and waste costs associated with running these equipment. They are becoming more common in pharmaceutical manufacturing programs, or can be from Vertex and Prozista from Janssen, are two such examples currently on the market. But before I go any further, I've been to a lot of presentations on flow chemistry, and I'm sure a lot of people that are at today's talk have also been to a number of talks and presentations around flow chemistry. And often those talks discuss it as in the terms of that it's the answer to every chemist's problems. And so the question is it? And what I'm going to say right now is it certainly is not. However, it is incredibly good for certain applications, and if you have a better tool for a specific job, if you've got it in your toolbox, you should use that tool and not try and use something which is not fit for purpose. When considering which reactions and processes would be most applicable to flow chemistry, we look at certain classifications of reaction, particularly reactions which progress rapidly, often have unstable intermediates or reaction products, or are highly parameter dependent. Reactions which are hazardous or have significant exotherms or pressure requirements are also great for flow applications. They can run at high temperature, you can use explosive materials, and also incredibly toxic and hazardous materials due to the nature of the small inventory. The safety controls that you need to control them are much simpler to implement and more robust than having to develop a full plant control system around your process.